Hey guys, Adam Trigger here, wagertalk.com. It's championship week. We keep the previews rolling, although we're getting toward the end of most of these tournaments are starting, but there's one that hasn't started yet, and that's the MAC. The MAC, it's Brian Powers' conference, his home conference at Ohio University grad. Him and I have seen a bunch of these schools together in person, so who better than to bring in and talk some MAC basketball than Brian Power. BP, what's going on? Can't wait to chat MAC tournament with you.
Yeah, and I have already assured the very worried, outstanding Wager Talk producers behind the scenes that there will be enough tape, enough recording space available for this preview. Only 8 teams, Trig, here, and the top seeds get really no reward for being the top seeds, which I know is something you and I dislike a lot in this tournament, which takes place right in my backyard, 20 minutes away at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. And I will be there on Friday for the semifinals, so I cannot wait to talk about all things Mid-American Conference here with you.
So BP, I do want, before we get into it, I want to ask you, because on paper, I hate this tournament. Like, I don't like the fact, like, I've kicked this around a little bit this week with some other guests that I've had on here, because a lot of these teams or a lot of these conferences will invite 15 teams or, everyone will play in some capacity. The MAC kind of says, you know what? No, we're only taking the top 8. I think there's some merit to that, but I also, it bothers me a little bit come tournament time when I guess like we're right into a quarterfinal round. Now, I love that you're going on Friday. You're going to get to see, they just bang them out game after game after game after game. No morning session, no late session. It's just tip off at 11 a.m. and we're going to play them back to back to back to back until we've played all 4 games. That's pretty cool. I think my biggest like pet peeve is I just remember the old MAC tournament where we had some campus site games to kick things off. Brian, I'm a big campus site guy. I loved that. So that element is gone. What's the atmosphere like at the MAC tournament, BP? It's a 19,000 seat arena. Is it full? Is it not? Like, what can we expect?
No, so it is played at the Cavs home arena downtown, and it depends. The atmosphere really depends, Trig, on which of the Final Four teams are there. If it is a heavy Ohio presence, you'll get a good atmosphere. Last year it was sort of, I think, the dream situation for tournament organizers because you had Toledo, Akron, Kent, and OU all there. So it's a strong turnout. If you get one of the Michigan teams, they're not well represented. I know Buffalo, when Nate Oates was, running the ship, they didn't have a strong representation there necessarily. So if it's Ohio heavy, the Final Four, because I always go to the semifinals because it's great. You get both games. Price of 1. They're back-to-back. It's a great Friday night. You can bet at the arena now, of course. So it really is dependent on who makes the Final Four. I'll say this. You talked about how it used to be campus sites, just for those less acclimated with the MAC tournament. This is the way it used to be. The top 4 seeds would get a bye to the quarterfinals, the top 4 finishers in the regular season, and then the bottom 8 would play at campus sites, and those winners would go on to meet the top 4 teams.
Yeah, I guess there's pros and cons to it. Like, for me, the MAC is like on the fringe. So this year, a clear one bid league. In most years, it's a one big league, but we've had years where they've teetered on like maybe getting a second bid. In these leagues where really one team ends up going, you've got to take care of the number 1 and number 2 seeds, and so that kind of your comment. They really don't do that here. It's Toledo's playing at 11 a.m. on Thursday, right? 11 a.m.
Again,
and it's win or go home
against a dangerous 8 seed that you're representing with your apparel. If they're going to go to 8 teams and knock out the bottom, which I'm not against. If you're, the Eastern Michigan, who's missing them? Who's missing Buffalo? Who's missing Northern Illinois in this thing? Those teams are not going to win 4 times in 4 days, right? But if you're going to do it where it's just 8 teams, I think they should do it the way the WCC, the West Coast Conference, has done it for years, where the top 2 seeds get the double buys into the semifinals. Because other than that, this is a league where there's a lot of parity, Trig. You know that. And why not reward your top regular season finishers, make that important for the conference tournament here in Cleveland?
Yeah, it's something I've always liked the WCC doing. The WAC has started to do it with like the kind of, the ladder format on each side playing into the 1 and the 2 seeds. Yeah, I mean, it's tough when these one bid leagues come up and, they're 1 seeds out on the first day. and then you end up with a not a great representative from the conference in the NCAA tournament. It's annoying, but it's kind of the format that we deal with. So let's get right into it. That one seed is Toledo, and they've got what I would consider. Yeah, that's kind of why I wore I chose this for the hoodie here, because if I was going to come up with like my strongest first round opinion, I think it's Kent State giving Toledo a game. Now, Brian, I want to ask you, like, this line was kind of puzzling to me, that it was so low. Kent State was an 8-point dog at Toledo. In the finale, they got killed. They were a 4-point underdog, 3.5, 4-point underdog in the earlier meeting this season. They got crushed. So here I am thinking, okay, maybe we'll get something in between there for a neutral, considering the results of those games. But it looks like they've opened it 4. Do you think Toledo gets bet up? And if so, are you willing to punch back against that? Because I kind of think there's some matchup angles that maybe favor Kent State here.
Well, for this game, I'm really eager to see what the market does. I agree. This number looks low. I think the market in general, Trig, has been very slow to react to the regression we've seen from Kent State, a regression that you and I sort of predicted in our MAC season preview we did here on the Wager Talk YouTube channel all the way back in November. Now, I don't want to speak for you, but I'll say for me, I didn't think Kent would slip all the way to the 8th seed in the tournament. It's shocking. They became vulnerable at home. That was a fortress. They hadn't lost at home in forever coming this year. I think they lost like 6 times at home this year. They've been battling through some injuries. It's a game I'm going to probably stay away from. I actually like 2 of the other first round matchups that we're going to get into. I like Toledo. I think what people need to know about Toledo is this. They have not been to a NCAA tournament since 1980. 1980 was a very fine year. It was the year I was born, but it was 43 years ago, Trig, and it is crazy that Toledo has not been to the big dance since the field expanded to 64 teams. They're the 1 seed. There's a lot of pressure that comes with that. I like, from an odds perspective to win the tournament, I actually like Toledo the best. I talked about this on the Power 5, the most recent edition. It's hard for me to see Toledo slipping up here and losing, which means I'm not rushing to bet a short number. If it gets bet up, maybe I would entertain the Golden Flashes like it sounds like you are.
Yeah, it would have to get bet up, but I think it's possible, right? Like Toledo is there. We know they're the 1 seed. Offense has been by far better than anyone in the conference, and we'll get into Akron in a minute, who kind of regressed and took a step back. But yeah, I mean, their offensive efficiency rating, 67 in Ken Palm. It's well above what the rest of the conference is at. If you look at conference-only offensive metrics, they're 1 or 2 in pretty much every category. But the defense is poor. Like, adjusted defensive efficiency for Kent State this year, 259th. I actually think that, like, I like Kent State and their sort of like physical nature, like, in how it would match up with Toledo. Now, it's puzzling to me. Like, you go back to the 2 regular season meetings and Toledo kind of blew them out. I guess that's a little bit shocking to me, BP. Like, I thought, Toledo typically doesn't defend the dribble drive well. Kent State kind of does that. Kent State turns teams into more like perimeter oriented teams. So maybe they get some shooting. It's 11 a.m. game. It's going to be their first game on a neutral. Like, maybe that helps if Kent State can turn Toledo into more of a shooting team in that scenario. It could help them just from a, sort of variant standpoint. Of course, Toledo is still a very good perimeter shooting team. I am hoping, BP, that for my sake here, I'm hoping that the masses bet Toledo, because if this gets up to 5.5 or 6, I could see myself jumping in with the Golden Flashes to play a close game.
Yeah, the only thing with Kent State, and this is what you have to monitor, is Chris Payton, who missed the last 3 games of the regular season. I think the line move, if there is one, towards Toledo might tell you that he's out again for that game. Mm-hmm. So that is something to monitor. Injuries, obviously. When you're at this level of college basketball, Trig, as you know, not a lot of depth. There's no really deep MAC roster to speak of, quite frankly, relative to, the big boys in the country.
Yeah, it's a really great point, BP, and I'll sort of use this to segue into our next thing. Like, in our preseason preview, when we talked about this conference, I think the main thing that kept coming up was, man, everyone lost someone. Like, this conference lost so much depth from last year to this year, which is why it's just hasn't been as good. Like, and for me personally, I haven't been as involved in MAC games from a betting standpoint this year, because it really watered these teams down to be somewhat similar. And then, of course, I couldn't find good spots to fade Akron. But that's a whole nother story. But the reason I want to bring up the depth component is that's kind of how I think personally that a Bowling Green is playing a Central Michigan in what I believe is a four, is that that's a 4 or 5 game, right? So
Yes.
who had that on their bingo card this year, right? Like I certainly didn't have a third place finish for Central Michigan in this league. And I don't know that I had Bowling Green that high, although I did see a little bit more upside with Bowling Green coming into the season. But man, like someone had to finish third and fourth, right? If all these other teams were going to take a step back, someone had to take a step forward. It feels like these were two of the teams that did. But how do we, like, what do we do with them now playing each other in the 4 or 5 game?
Well, here's the thing. I think back in that season preview, Trig, you and I agreed that it was Toledo, Akron, and Ohio were definitely top four, which they finished top four, and Kent State would take a step back. Now, I thought Kent State would probably still finish top four. They obviously did not, as we just mentioned, so someone has to move up, and that team was indeed Central Michigan. Central Michigan is very much the inverse or opposite of Toledo. They are number one in the conference in defensive efficiency, but their offense is woeful. 324th nationally. That is bottom 40 in the country. I actually like Bowling Green to win this game. Ken Palm has them, despite being the lower seed, as a 2-point winner. That's right in line with where the market has, I believe. The opening number is Bowling Green -2. I expect Bowling Green's going to advance here to take on, presumably, Toledo in the first of 2 semifinals on Friday that I will attend.
Yeah, it's sort of a theme that I keep bringing up in these conference previews. When you get in a neutral floor and it's a true neutral floor scenario where you have to win multiple games in multiple days, I tend to gravitate toward the offensively efficient, offensively capable team. I really, it's not to say teams can't grind it out in a one-off scenario. I just find that it's like harder to string together like 3 just like ridiculous defensive performances than it is to just like kind of get hot and have a team go off offensively. And that's where, of course, you've got Bowling Green. For the most part, outside of like 3-point shooting, their offensive metrics overall are, I would say that's maybe my criticism of them is like they kind of get into like the take bad shot, they take bad shots at times, but a lot of that happened on the road. This, of course, is neutral. And, Central Michigan, they're very close to the bottom in a lot of these, offensive metrics. 2-point percentage 7th in the league, 3-point percentage 9th. So yeah, I'm kind of with you there. I've been looking for a good spot to play against Central Michigan, and maybe this is it. But we'll continue down the bracket.
I just want to say one thing about Central Michigan's defense, Trick. One thing. So they were dead last in the conference in forcing turnovers, but they were number one in both effective field goal percentage and 2-point percentage defense. So what does that mean? Were they fortunate, do you think, when it came to opponent shooting? Is there a little negative regression heading their way? Possibly. That's just another reason I think to fade the Chippewas on Thursday.
No, it's a great point. And I'm with you. It would probably be Bowling Green or pass, but I certainly looking for like a spot to maybe jump in and fade Central Michigan at some point in this tournament. Maybe you only get one chance. If BP's right, you only get one chance because that would mean they're going home. Another team that I'd like to try to find a spot to play against is Akron. This is one, we kind of both agreed coming into the tournament, coming into the season, Brian, that Akron was probably the best because of what they returned in this league. Like they just seemed, knowing they were getting Ali, back, like they just seemed to have the most talent returning. But I think we kind of did a show maybe middle of the season where it was like, okay, there's some real issues with this team. And they kind of showed up in the, the final week of the season, if you will, final maybe 10 days, where Akron lost 3 of 4 and pretty much squandered this league away, right? Like they pretty much choked away the regular season title in this league with 2 very, very bad losses to Eastern Michigan. And then, of course, Western Michigan on the final day of the season. By that point, maybe they just thought, okay, well, Toledo has this thing won. They're not going to lose to Kent State, so we don't need to show up for this game. But that was certainly shocking to give up 90 points to Western Michigan. They come in here on losing 3 of 4. They were the odds-on favorite coming into this season. How do you feel about that? Does that make you want to sort of, come back with them now that it's like maybe they're refocused? Or do you think they're laying too many, giving 8 to a Red Hawks team that did knock them off earlier in the regular season?
Yeah, so here's the deal with Akron. First of all, you talk about that loss to Eastern Michigan. That they were 21-point favorites at home. Trig. That was one of the most shocking losses of the entire college basketball season, in my opinion. I don't know how many teams lost outright as 20-point home favorites this season, but I'm assuming that list was rather short. I would not fade Akron in this quarterfinal spot against Miami. You mentioned the revenge angle. You mentioned the poor finish to the regular season. I think the Zips come out with their hair on fire with a statement to prove. Do I want to lay 3 possessions with them? I don't know. I will think about that over the next 24 hours, but I don't want to fade the Zips in this first tournament game. They are still the favorite to win the tournament, we should note. They have the lowest odds. So I think for sure they're going to advance. I think they're going to beat Miami. Whether or not they can win the 3 games in 3 days remains to be seen. But yeah, I think Akron's got something to prove this first game. If not, oof, I don't know what to say.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you there. I don't know if I'll actually get to the window taking the points with Miami of Ohio, but I would like to find maybe down the road if they do survive that first round game, or actually, more importantly, if they win it big, that would be the better scenario.
Yeah.
Maybe they come out, just smash Miami of Ohio in the quarterfinal round. I'd love to find a way to play against them as getting a dog, as they would almost be favored against. I don't know about Toledo, but they'd be favored against just about anyone else. So I'd like to find a way to play against them. And BP, maybe that's with your alma mater, the team that I kind of like the most in this tournament, and that's the Ohio Bobcats. Something that I tend to do. And here's the thing, and this is just something that I tend to do in conference tournaments, is go back to the beginning of the year and look at what my preseason projections were, who I thought was going to win the league, who I was the highest on. And if they didn't live up to that, I tend to try to find a way, can I make a case for them in the conference tournament? I guess the thought process behind that is maybe they're a little bit undervalued. So I thought Ohio coming into the year was a potential dark horse in this. I don't know if I would call them a dark horse, but I thought they could be the team that emerged because the other teams kind of took a step back. And I guess they did and they didn't. They did to, an extent that they finished third, but they didn't really sniff winning the league, which I thought they could have. So that makes me want to potentially get involved with them. But that, I don't know, the odds to win are a little bit short. I would have liked a little bit more value with them to win. But that being said, I would like to find a way to play on Ohio. I don't know if it's here in the 3-6 matchup, but you're the one of the most famous alums to ever come out of this school, BP. So help me make sense of this. 6 versus 3, Western Michigan, Ohio.
Depth, kind of an issue. Trig for OU. I'm worried about Miles, but no Miles Brown, most likely. They were 12-3 when he was in the lineup. So again, we come back to the issue of lack of depth. It shouldn't cost them in the quarterfinals. I anticipate the Bobcats will advance. I'm obviously really hoping they advance because I'm going to the semifinals and I want to watch them play in person. And I would love to watch OU against Akron, against former coach John Gross, Trig, the architect of OU's most famous basketball team, perhaps that Sweet 16 team from 2012 that lost to North Carolina. OU just kind of feels like the third wheel to me in this tournament. Toledo is the 1 seed who I think from an odds perspective is the best bet. Akron is the favorite still. OU is just sort of lingering. I don't know. It would be interesting. I like I said, expect them to play Friday. We shall see. I think it would really be interesting what those two teams do in their first game, Trig, to see how we would bet a potential OU Akron semifinal.
So BP, I've come across this. I've done so many of these previews now that I'm finding a trend with how how they're priced, and just it comes up here with the Ohios and the Akrons. It really feels like it's difficult to find value with the other perceived good teams. So the point is do you take a favorite or one of the favorites who are clear cut the best team? It seems like the teams in the 3, 4, 5 range are priced to tempt you into taking them, but the books are never going to give you the value that they should on those teams. So I'm finding that I either need to target, like you either need to take a stand and say, I love Toledo and I think they're going to win this tournament. And I'm going to take the, whatever it is, like the short plus money on that to win. Or I'm going to go off the board a little bit and try to find like a long shot that I can get some real value with, or listen to Kelly in Vegas and parlay them each round. Don't ever bet a future. One of those three things. But I got to think, like, is it Toledo's year? Is this the year that, like, are they going to, like, I do like Kent State with the points if I get the right number in the first round. But if they get through the flashes, are they cutting the nets down in Cleveland this year for the first time since 1980?
Yeah, big picture, Trig. The big reason why I like Toledo, gave that out on the Power 5 to win this tournament is, to me, I mean, the number one seed having the third best odds, that is a little head scratching to me, especially when you look at the way the back bracket broke. Pardon me. Akron and Ohio are in the other half. It would honestly be a really big surprise to me, and obviously a huge disappointment to Toledo fans if this team did not get to the tournament finals. Central Michigan, who I mentioned, and I think will lose the Bowling Green. Central Michigan has been missing 3 different starters over the last week. Bowling Green is a team that I, even though I like them against Central Michigan, I wouldn't like them against Toledo. That's a big rivalry game. So if Toledo gets to the finals and you've got them better than 3-1, you can hedge a little bit if they're facing Akron or Ohio in the final. And I think you're in good shape there. And that's kind of the way I think this tournament plays out. I would be stunned, Trig, if a team other than Toledo, Akron, or Ohio won this. I don't think any of the other teams are very good, quite frankly. It would take some sort of Herculean effort, some sort of insane hot shooting for anyone else in this field to cut down the nets in Cleveland on Saturday.
Yeah, that's kind of how I'm looking at it. Like I said, I thought Kent State was live in their first round matchup, but like, there's no way I would take them at 6. There's no way I would take Kent State at 6-1 to win this thing when I could have Toledo at 3-1. Like, there's just no way. So like, what I may do, and another sort of, if you like Kent State in that first round game, what you could do if you're going to bet Kent State is just wait and then try to bet it on Friday, because like, yeah, you're going to lose some of that plus money, but by that point, like, you're still probably getting what, like even money, maybe like plus 150, depending on who advances in the other games. You're still probably getting a scenario where you could bet Toledo, should they get through Kent State, you could bet them to win the Final Four, if you will, and you're still like getting a playable price. The only way that price is not playable at that point is if Western Michigan and Miami of Ohio are like both pull upsets, and I just don't think that's going to happen. So kind of an alternative route, but yeah, I mean, I think you take a stand with like a Toledo in this situation if that's who you like. Akron, who I would personally fade, and I think that's how you have to approach betting this tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. And just one more time, I'll be there Friday at the semifinals. Another thing I hate about this tournament, they bumped up the start time of Friday's semifinals. The first game tips off at 5 p.m. Eastern. That is not a problem for people like you and I, Trig, who work at home. Well, it'd be a problem. I mean, it'd be a long drive for you. But for me, it's not a problem. I work from home. I can just get in my car and go. But all my friends who work and want to come to the game, it's kind of a scramble. Not that I don't work. Obviously, I work. But, that work in offices can't necessarily get off. It's kind of a scramble to get there by 5 p.m. Eastern for that first tip. I used to love when it was 7 and 9:30, but I'll be there anyway.
I'll throw this out there before we close up. No one on this probably cares about my opinion on this. This is an actionable information betting show. But if I had to say, Brian, and they're not going to let me move it back to campus sites, I would move this MAC to the first weekend. I would move it to the first weekend, have them finish the season earlier, and have them get more of the spotlight. I just think it would be like, it would elevate the profile of this conference to play this tournament on the first weekend as opposed to the second weekend. Again, no one cares about my opinion, but that's just something that I think that one of these conferences needs to do it. There's not enough on the first weekend. Someone else needs to move back to the first weekend.
Well, and your home conference, the MAC with the extra A, Ken Pom has our two conferences rated fairly evenly, kind of in the bottom 10 of America. So there's really no reason that either of our conference should be playing this weekend when absolutely, probably to your point, very few people nationally care about either of those tournaments. So yeah, I'd be all in favor of bumping it up one week.
Yeah, no, someone's got to do it. We got to get these games get lost in the shuffle on Saturday, Friday, and stuff like that. Move back to the first weekend. Give us more games on the first weekend, less on the second. It's just better that way. But yes, this was the MAC preview. I'm kind of with BP. I think if you're going to take one team to win this, it's got to probably be Toledo. I offered you like another sort of, way to bet them. My first round strongest lean is probably Kent State. But I'm not sure how much I'll even get involved in this tournament. It was involved far less in the MAC this year than I have been in years past. So we'll have to see. BP, any closing comments for you?
No, I think that about covers it. I think we did a good job. 8 teams. I think we got it in less than 30 minutes here, something like that. So, who had that? You talk about a plus money wager right there. You and I doing a preview in less than a half hour. The critics are in shock right now behind the scenes, and I'll take that win, which I knew was going to happen.
All right, Brian Power, myself, you can find us both at Wager Talk. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel so we can keep bringing you these free previews and more free content. And follow us on Twitter. Hit the like button. We'll see you guys soon.